The letter opener slid between his ribs easier than I expected. A whisper of resistance, then warmth spreading across my trembling fingers. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, everything stopped. The rain hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The distant hum of the city 40 stories below. Even my own breathing seemed to pause, suspended in the space between action and consequence. Dante's gray eyes widened, but not with pain. With something worse. Surprise. Betrayal. The kind of hurt that has nothing to do with the 3 inches of silver steel now buried in his chest and everything to do with the fact that it was my hand on the handle. Elena, he said, my name escaping his lips with a wet sound that made my stomach lurch. Blood bloomed across his crisp white dress shirt like a crimson flower opening to the sun, spreading fast, too fast. His hand reached for me. Whether to hurt me or hold me, I would never know, because I was already moving backward, my bare feet slipping slightly on the white marble floor as the letter opener pulled free with a sound I would hear in my nightmares for years to come. The gun. I could see it now, still sitting on the edge of his desk where he'd placed it 3 minutes ago. 3 minutes that had changed everything. 3 minutes that had shown me exactly who I'd married, what I'd become part of, and how little my life had meant in the grand calculation of his empire. He'd pointed that gun at my chest. Not in anger. That would have been better somehow, more human. No, he'd done it with the cold calculation of a man making a business decision. The same way he'd probably pointed guns at dozens of people before me. The same way he'd ordered deaths, sanctioned violence, built an empire on fear and blood while I slept peacefully in our bed, ignorant and willfully blind. You weren't supposed to see, he'd said, his voice so calm it made my skin crawl. You were supposed to be at the salon, getting ready for tonight. Tonight, the charity gala. 3 hours ago, I'd been standing in our walk-in closet, holding up 2 dresses, the blue Valentino or the black Dior, asking him which one he preferred. He'd pulled me close, kissed my temple, told me I'd look beautiful in either. That he loved me, that tonight would be special. He'd been lying, or maybe he'd meant it. With Dante, the truth was always layered, complex, wrapped in justifications I could no longer stomach. To come back early. The salon had called to reschedule. Such a small thing, such an insignificant twist of fate. If they hadn't called, I'd be there now, sitting in a chair while someone styled my hair, while someone painted my nails, while my husband did whatever he was doing in the basement of our building. The basement I'd never been allowed to enter. The basement with the reinforced door and the security system and the soundproofing that I'd convinced myself was for wine storage or valuable art or any of 100 innocent explanations. But I'd come home early, and I'd heard the screaming. Even now, standing in his office with his blood on my hands and my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest, I could hear those screams echoing in my memory. Raw, primal sounds of agony that no amount of concrete and steel could fully contain. I'd followed them like breadcrumbs through our home. Our home, the penthouse we'd shared for 3 years. Down corridors I'd walked 1,000 times, to a service elevator I'd never noticed before. The security camera footage was still playing on his laptop when I'd burst into his office. Black and white images of a concrete room, of Dante standing over a man tied to a chair, of violence so casual it looked choreographed. And Dante's voice, tinny through the speakers. I'm going to ask you one more time. Where is the shipment? I'd frozen in the doorway. He'd spun around, seen me, seen my face, seen the exact moment my world shattered. And he'd reached for the gun. Elena, listen to me. His voice had been so reasonable, so measured. This isn't what you think. But it was exactly what I thought. It was everything I'd suspected and refused to believe for 3 years. Every late-night phone call. Every business trip to cities he couldn't name. Every time he'd come home with scraped knuckles and called it a disagreement with a supplier. Every moment I'd chosen to look away because the alternative, accepting what he really was, would mean accepting what that made me. Put the gun down, I'd whispered. I can't do that. Still so calm. Not until we talk. Not until you understand. I understand perfectly. No, you don't. That man in the basement, I don't want to know. The words had ripped out of me, surprising us both with their vehemence. I don't want your explanations or your justifications. I don't want to know how you sleep at night after doing what you do. His jaw had tightened, the first sign of real anger. You think you have the moral high ground here? You've spent 3 years enjoying the benefits of my work. Every dress in your closet. Every dinner at 5-star restaurants. This apartment. Your art classes. Your charity committees. All of it paid for with money you suddenly find so offensive. He'd been right. That was the worst part. I had known on some level. I'd chosen not to look too closely at the source of our wealth. The reason other people whispered when we entered rooms. The way police officers and judges and city officials treated Dante with a mixture of fear and respect that had nothing to do with legitimate business. I'd been a coward. A willing accomplice in my own ignorance. But I wasn't going to be one anymore. The letter opener had been sitting on his desk. A gift from some business associate. Silver and sharp and perfectly balanced. I'd grabbed it without thinking, pure instinct overriding the 3 years of learned helplessness. The slow erosion of my sense of self that happens when you love someone dangerous. And then I'd stabbed him. Now, as he collapsed against his desk, one hand pressed to his chest and the other reaching out. Still reaching for me even now. I had perhaps 5 seconds to make a choice. Help him. Call 911. Try to stop the bleeding and hope he didn't use whatever strength he had left to kill me for this betrayal. Or run. I ran. My bare feet found purchase on the marble. I'd kicked off my heels somewhere between the elevator and his office, and I was moving through the penthouse I'd called home, past the living room with its original Rothko that I'd thought made us cultured, past the kitchen where we'd cooked Sunday breakfasts together, past the bedroom where I'd woken up this morning with his arm around my waist and felt safe. The emergency bag was exactly where I'd hidden it 3 weeks ago, tucked behind the winter coats in the guest room closet. 3 weeks since I'd started planning this escape, gathering cash in small amounts, photocopying documents, preparing for a moment I'd hoped would never come. But some part of me had known. Some part of me had been preparing since the day I'd met Dante Salvatore and felt that electric thrill of danger disguised as attraction. I grabbed the bag, $12,000 in cash, a fake ID I'd bought from one of the line cooks at Dante's restaurant, a change of clothes, a burner phone, and ran for the private elevator. Behind me, I could hear Dante's voice, surprisingly strong for a man with a punctured lung, calling my name. Not angry, almost pleading. Elena. Elena, wait. We can fix this. We couldn't fix this. You couldn't fix 3 years of lies. You couldn't fix the blood on my hands or the screams still echoing in my ears or the gun he'd pointed at my chest. You couldn't fix the fundamental truth that I'd married a monster and been too dazzled by his charm to see it. The elevator descended, each floor a countdown to freedom or capture. My reflection stared back at me from the mirrored walls. Evening gowns stained with blood, hair wild, eyes too wide, face too pale. I looked like something from a horror movie. I looked like a stranger. Marco was at the lobby desk when the doors opened. Good, loyal Marco, who'd worked for the Salvatores for 15 years, who knew exactly what Dante was and served him anyway. His eyes widened when he saw me. Mrs. Salvatore is everything. I didn't wait for him to finish. Didn't wait to see if he'd try to stop me or call up to Dante or sound some kind of alarm. I just ran, pushing through the glass doors into the night, into the rain that had started while I was upstairs destroying my life, into the city that suddenly felt foreign and dangerous and full of Dante's eyes. The rain soaked through my gown in seconds, mixing with the blood, turning everything pink and diluted. My feet hit wet pavement, and I ran toward the subway entrance 2 blocks away, weaving through late-night pedestrians who stared but didn't stop, who saw a crazy woman in a ball gown running barefoot through the rain and probably assumed it was just another New York City story they'd tell their friends tomorrow. Behind me, I could hear shouting. Or maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just the rain and the traffic and my own pulse thundering in my ears. I'd aimed for his shoulder, I kept thinking, the thought looping obsessively as I ran. God. I'd aimed for his shoulder. But he'd moved at the last second, turning toward me, and the blade had gone in too low, too center. Had I killed him? Was Dante Salvatore dead by my hand? 3 years of marriage. 3 minutes of violence. 1 chance at freedom, and I'd taken it. Sophia's apartment had been my sanctuary for exactly 18 hours before I understood that sanctuary was an illusion. The kind of illusion desperate people cling to because the alternative, accepting that there's nowhere safe, nowhere far enough, nowhere that Dante Salvatore's reach doesn't extend, is too terrifying to contemplate. I made it to the subway that night, my blood-stained gown drawing stares I barely registered. Made it to Sophia's building in the Arts District, where she buzzed me up without questions, where she pulled me inside and locked 3 deadbolts behind us like that would make a difference. Where I stood dripping rain and blood onto her hardwood floors while she stared at me with the kind of horror that comes from understanding exactly what you're looking at. Jesus Christ, Elena, what did you do? I stabbed him. The words came out flat, disconnected from the reality they described. I stabbed Dante. Her face went pale. Is he? I don't know. I didn't wait to check. She moved then, nurse instincts overriding shock, pulling me toward her bathroom, turning on the shower, helping me peel off the ruined gown that had cost more than most people's monthly rent. The water ran pink, then red, then pink again, then finally clear. I stood under the spray until it ran cold, until my skin was numb, until I couldn't tell anymore what was rain and what was blood and what was just the regular corruption of being alive. When I finally emerged, wrapped in Sophia's bathrobe, I caught my reflection in the steamed mirror. Didn't recognize the woman staring back. Same face, same features, but something fundamental had shifted. I crossed a line tonight that couldn't be uncrossed. I'd driven a blade into another human being. Into my husband. Into the father of. My hand went to my stomach. Flat. Still flat. Nothing there to indicate the complication I hadn't known existed yet. Sophia had the news on in her living room. I heard it before I saw it, the urgent tone that anchors use when something big has happened. When I walked in, my own face was on the screen. My wedding photo, the one where I looked radiant and in love and catastrophically naive. Breaking news tonight. Dante Salvatore, prominent businessman and alleged organized crime figure, was rushed to St. Vincent's Hospital following a stabbing incident at his penthouse residence. Police are seeking his wife, Elena Salvatore, for questioning. Salvatore is listed in critical condition following emergency surgery. Critical condition. Not dead. He'd survived. I should have felt relief. Should have been grateful I wasn't a murderer. Instead, all I felt was a cold, creeping terror, because critical condition meant he was alive. Meant he would recover. Meant he would come for me. You can't stay here, Sophia said quietly. This is the first place they'll look. I know. My voice sounded strange. I just need one night. Then I'll disappear. My phone had been buzzing nonstop in my bag. Dante's second-in-command, Luca. 37 missed calls. Text messages scrolling across the screen like an indictment. Mrs. Salvatore, please. We need to talk. The boss is asking for you. He's conscious. I stared at the phone. Already. Sophia took it from my shaking hands, turned it off, removed the SIM card with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd thought about disappearing before. My brother worked for the Salvatores, she said, not looking at me. Past tense. I'd known Sophia for 2 years. She'd never mentioned a brother. What happened to him? He asked too many questions. Her jaw was tight. He's alive, if that's what you're asking. Living in Oregon under a different name, working construction. But he's not my brother anymore. Not really. That person died the day he ran. I understood then why she'd helped me without hesitation. Why she kept pregnancy tests in her medicine cabinet. Why she knew how to remove a SIM card and probably a dozen other things about running that she'd learned too young, too personally. The nausea hit around 3 in the morning. I barely made it to the bathroom before I was vomiting, my body purging everything. The fear, the adrenaline, the last meal I'd eaten in my old life. Sophia found me on the floor, held my hair back, pressed a cool cloth to my neck. Adrenaline crash, she said. Totally normal after trauma. But my hand was already on my stomach, pressing against the flatness there, feeling for something I couldn't name. Presence. A knowing. When was your last period? The question hung in the air between us. I counted backward. 6 weeks? 7? I'd been so consumed with planning my escape, with gathering resources, with the slow-building dread that had characterized my last months with Dante, that I hadn't noticed, hadn't thought about it, had attributed the fatigue and the occasional nausea to stress. No. The word came out strangled. No, 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 no. Sophia was already moving, pulling a box from under her sink. I'm a nurse. I keep these for situations. Take it. 3 minutes. The test required 3 minutes to process. 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours while I sat on the cold bathroom tile and Sophia held my hand, and somewhere in the city my husband, my would-be murderer, my victim, lay in a hospital bed recovering from the wound I'd given him. The timer on Sophia's phone went off with a cheerful chime that felt obscene in the circumstances. 2 lines. Clear and unmistakable. I slid down the bathroom wall until I was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, arms wrapped around them like I could hold myself together through sheer force of will. I stabbed the father of my child. Sophia's face was a mixture of pity and fear. How far along do you think? I don't know. We were regular. Up until 3 weeks ago when I started pulling away. When I'd started planning this. When I'd started hiding money and making copies of documents and researching how to disappear. When some instinct I hadn't fully acknowledged had been screaming that I needed an exit strategy. You need to leave, Sophia said. Tonight. Now. Before they find you here. But I couldn't move. Couldn't process the reality of my new existence. Pregnant. On the run. Wanted for attempted murder of one of the most dangerous men on the East Coast. This wasn't how my life was supposed to go. This wasn't the story I'd imagined for myself when I'd fallen in love with Dante's charm, his intensity, the way he'd made me feel like the center of his universe. I'd been the center of his universe. That was the problem. In Dante's world, the things at the center didn't get to leave. They got protected, controlled, possessed. And now I was carrying a piece of him that he would never, ever let go. 3 months later, I would understand exactly how true that was. 3 months later, standing in a free clinic in a town 300 miles away, staring at an ultrasound screen that showed not 1 but 2 flickering heartbeats, I would realize that I hadn't just stabbed Dante Salvatore and run. I'd taken something infinitely more valuable than my own freedom. I'd taken his legacy, his bloodline, his future, and he would burn the world down to get it back. But that night, in Sophia's bathroom, I didn't know about the twins yet. Didn't know that Dante's blood had already been tested, that the hospital had found traces of my DNA under his fingernails from when we'd struggled, that they'd run genetic tests looking for poison and found pregnancy hormones instead. Didn't know he'd been conscious and aware and planning since the moment they'd pulled him out of surgery. That night, I only knew that I was pregnant and alone and terrified, and that somewhere in the city, my husband was alive and would be looking for me. I should have run further. Should have left the state, the country, gotten on a plane to somewhere Dante's name meant nothing. But fear makes you stupid, makes you think that distance is the same as safety, makes you believe that 300 miles and a new name and a job slinging coffee at a beachside diner will be enough. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But I didn't know that yet. 3 months of silence. 3 months of salt air and cheap coffee and the constant, gnawing fear that today would be the day Dante found me. Except he already had found me 2 weeks ago according to Sophia, and he was waiting, playing with me like a cat with a mouse it's not quite ready to kill. The coastal town of Clearwater Bay was supposed to be my refuge. 300 miles from the city, small enough that strangers were noticed, isolated enough that Dante's world felt like something from another lifetime. I'd become Ellie Chun, a name I'd pulled from a random obituary and a fake ID that had cost me $2,000 of my carefully hoarded cash. I worked at the Lighthouse Cafe, a weathered building that smelled like bacon grease and sea salt, where the owner Betty treated me with the kind of maternal concern I hadn't experienced since my own mother died. But today, standing in the free clinic in the next town over, staring at an ultrasound screen that showed two distinct heartbeats flickering like twin stars in the darkness. I understood that refuge was another illusion. The biggest one yet. There are two heartbeats, Ellie. Dr. Patel's voice was gentle, professional, completely unaware that she just detonated a bomb in what remained of my life. You're pregnant with twins. The room tilted. Or maybe I did. The ceiling and floor traded places while those two heartbeats continued their steady rhythm, oblivious to the chaos they represented. Two babies. Dante's babies. Two pieces of him growing inside me, two reasons he would never, ever stop hunting. You're measuring around 14 to 15 weeks. Dr. Patel continued, moving the ultrasound wand across my stomach with practiced ease. The gel was cold, clinical, utterly at odds with the heat of panic spreading through my chest. Did you not know you were pregnant? I'd known. Sort of. The pregnancy test at Sophia's apartment had told me that much before I'd run. But one baby was a complication. Two babies was a catastrophe. Twins run in families, Dr. Patel said conversationally, probably trying to fill my shocked silence with something resembling normalcy. Do they run in yours? Or the father's? Dante had mentioned it once, early in our marriage when we were still playing at being a normal couple. His twin brother Marco, dead at 12, murdered by enemies of their father. Dante had been there when it happened. Had watched his identical twin, the other half of himself, die while he survived. He told me the story matter-of-factly, the way you might mention a childhood pet that had run away, but I'd seen something flicker behind his eyes. Grief, maybe, or guilt at being the one who lived. Now I was carrying two more Salvatore twins, two more potential targets, two more bargaining chips in a war I'd tried to escape. Your blood pressure is quite high, Dr. Patel said, and the concern in her voice pulled me back to the present. Stress levels are clearly elevated. Twin pregnancies require more careful monitoring than singletons. You'll need proper prenatal care, not just one checkup. I can't. The words came out strangled. I mean, I travel a lot for work. Dr. Patel's expression shifted, becoming less doctor and more something else. Someone who'd seen this before. Women with fake names and cash payments and terror barely hidden behind their eyes. Whoever you're running from, she said quietly, your babies need you healthy. The prescription she wrote included prenatal vitamins and blood pressure medication and an appointment for 2 weeks from now. If you don't come back, she added, I'm obligated to report this as potential neglect. So I was trapped. Between Dante and the system. Between the man who would never let me go and the law that would take my children if it thought I couldn't care for them. I made it back to my apartment. A cramped space above a bookstore that creaked with every step, before the panic truly set in. My burner phone was ringing, the one with exactly one contact saved in it. Sophia. We hadn't spoken in 3 months because every conversation was a risk, a potential way for Dante to trace me. But she was calling now, and that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. Sophia. Thank God. Her voice was tight with stress. Elena, we need to talk. How did you get this number? I changed. I know. I'm sorry. But you need to hear this. She took a breath, and I could picture her in her apartment, probably looking over her shoulder the way I'd learned to do. He knows you're pregnant. The world contracted to the size of my small kitchen. The phone pressed against my ear, the sound of my own heartbeat drowning out the distant cry of seagulls. That's impossible. I didn't know until after. Hospital records. When they treated him, they ran your DNA from under his fingernails. From the struggle, they ran genetic tests looking for poison. Found pregnancy hormones instead. Of course Dante would have been thorough. Would have tested for every possibility. Would have wanted to know if I'd poisoned the blade before I'd driven it into his chest. He's known for 2 months, Elena. 2 months. He's been having you investigated quietly. Private investigators, 3 different firms. One of them tracked you to Clearwater Bay 2 weeks ago. Then why hasn't he come? Sophia's silence was worse than any answer she could have given. "When Dante plays games, people die," she said finally. "And Elena, there's something else. The surveillance footage you found, the basement videos. He's erased everything. Every copy, every trace. If you try to use that against him, you have no proof." I knew I should run. Should pack my meager belongings and disappear again. Find another small town. Another fake name. Another temporary illusion of safety. But I was so tired. Tired of running. Tired of being afraid. Tired of living like a ghost. The apartment felt different when I climbed the stairs that evening. Wrong somehow. The door was unlocked, and I knew with absolute certainty that I'd locked it that morning. Had checked it twice the way I checked everything now. Inside, nothing was obviously disturbed. But everything was wrong in subtle ways. Drawers opened and carefully closed. My few possessions examined and replaced almost exactly where they'd been. Professional job. The kind of search that leaves no obvious evidence but makes its point perfectly clear. On my bed, a single red rose. The card attached said simply, "For the mother of my children." He knew about the twins. Had known before I did. Had been here, in my space, close enough to touch my things, to leave his calling card. Could have taken me then, but had chosen not to. This was worse than capture. This was ownership. A reminder that I existed only because he allowed it. My blood pressure spiked so fast I could feel it. A pressure behind my eyes, a roaring in my ears. The babies were kicking, both of them, frantic movements like they could sense my fear. I tried the breathing exercises Dr. Patel had taught me, but they weren't working. The room was spinning and my vision was blurring and I needed help but couldn't risk a hospital. Couldn't risk anyone knowing my real name. I made it to the stairs somehow. Started down toward the bookstore. Toward Mr. Chun, who sometimes made me tea and never asked questions. But my legs weren't working right and the stairs were too steep and then I was falling, catching myself, collapsing at the bottom. Mr. Chun found me there. Called an ambulance despite my protests. Despite me trying to explain that I couldn't, that they would find me, that Dante would know. But the EMT was already checking my vitals, already loading me onto a stretcher, already telling me what I already knew. "Ma'am, you're in preterm labor distress. We need to get you stabilized. No hospitals. Please, I can't. It's the babies or your pride. Choose." I chose the babies. Of course I chose the babies. At the hospital I gave a different name. Sarah Mitchell this time. No insurance would pay cash. The nurses exchanged glances, the kind of look that said they'd seen women like me before, women running from something, women who'd rather risk death than be found. They got me stabilized. Got the baby's heartbeat steady. Got my blood pressure down to something that wouldn't kill me. I was lying in bed, monitors beeping their reassurance, when my phone lit up in my bag. Unknown number. Text message. Room 304. St. Mary's Hospital. You should be more careful, cara mia. Stress isn't good for our sons. Our sons. He knew the gender. Knew everything. I looked at the door, at the shadow of expensive shoes visible underneath. Italian leather. Custom made. The kind Dante wore when he wanted to make an impression. The door opened and there he was. 3 months since I'd stabbed him and run. 3 months since I'd seen those gray eyes that had once made me feel safe and now made my heart rate spike on the monitor. He was leaning on a silver-handled cane, moving with careful deliberation. A scar was visible on his neck where the letter opener had exited. His hair had gone gray at the temples. Stress or pain, I couldn't tell. He looked older, harder, more dangerous, and somehow, impossibly, still devastatingly handsome. "Get out," I managed, trying to sit up. "Get out. Is that any way to greet the father of your children?" His voice was calm, that Italian accent thicker than I remembered. He sat in the visitor's chair, wincing slightly. "I'm here to ensure you and our sons receive the best care possible." "How did you know you were here? Know you've been in Clearwater Bay for 3 months? Know you're carrying twin boys?" He tapped his temple, That familiar gesture I'd seen him make 1,000 times when closing a business deal. I've always known where you were, Elena. I simply chose to wait. The NICU had become our neutral territory. A demilitarized zone where Dante and I existed in careful orbit around our suns. Two planets that never quite touched but were bound by the same gravitational pull. 2 weeks of this careful choreography. Morning shifts and afternoon shifts, and those 2 terrible hours of overlap where we were forced to occupy the same space, breathe the same recycled hospital air, pretend that civility was the same thing as forgiveness. Twin A was thriving, as much as a 3-pound premature baby could thrive. The nurses had started calling him the fighter because he grabbed their fingers during examinations, because he was already trying to pull out his feeding tube, because he seemed determined to prove that Salvatore blood really did run thicker. Twin B was struggling. Smaller, weaker, still on oxygen support. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, which I'd learned was medical speak for, "We're worried, but trying not to scare you." "They need names," Dante said during one of our overlap hours, his voice carefully neutral. He was standing on one side of Twin B's incubator. I was on the other. We'd learned to position ourselves this way with something between us. Glass, plastic, machinery. Anything to maintain the illusion of distance. Not baby A and B. I'm not naming them until they're safe. My hand was pressed against the incubator's clear side, as close as I could get to touching my son without disturbing the nest of wires and tubes keeping him alive. That's superstitious nonsense. That's my decision. His jaw tightened, that tell I'd learned to read during our marriage. The muscle that jumped when he was holding back anger. Our decision. I'm their father. Biology doesn't make you a father, Dante. Action does. The words hung between us, sharp and cutting. I watched something flicker behind his eyes. Hurt, maybe, or something approximating it. Then his mask was back in place, smooth and unreadable as marble. But later, when he thought I wasn't watching, I saw him showing me how to change a NICU diaper. The technique was different for babies this small, this fragile. His hands were surprisingly gentle, surprisingly practiced. Like he'd been doing this for longer than 2 weeks. Like he'd been preparing for fatherhood while I'd been running from it. I taught him the Spanish lullaby my mother used to sing to me. Didn't mean to. It just came out one afternoon when Twin A was fussing, when nothing the nurses did seemed to calm him. I started humming without thinking, and the baby quieted almost immediately. When I looked up, Dante was watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Teach me," he said quietly. So I did. Sang the words slowly while he repeated them, his Italian accent wrapping around Spanish syllables in a way that shouldn't have been as affecting as it was. Our voices overlapped, harmonized, and for 3 minutes we weren't 2 people in a war. We were just 2 parents trying to soothe a crying baby. Our hands brushed once, both of us reaching to adjust Twin B's blanket at the same moment. We pulled back like we'd been burned. The air between us crackled with something I refused to name. Sophia appeared on a Thursday, somehow finding me even though I'd never told her which hospital. She cornered me in the parking lot during one of my breaks, away from Dante's surveillance, away from the careful performance we'd been maintaining. "How did you find me?" "Same way Dante did." She pulled me into a hug that I hadn't realized I desperately needed. "You're not as invisible as you think." I broke down then, for the first time since the emergency C-section. Months of fear and exhaustion and confusion pouring out in the space between parked cars, while Sophia held me and didn't offer any easy answers. "I don't know what's real anymore," I sobbed into her shoulder. "What if he's telling the truth? What if I was wrong about that night?" She pulled back, studying my face with the clinical assessment of a nurse and the concern of a friend. I did some digging. About the basement footage. The tablet she pulled from her bag showed news articles I'd never seen. Stories from 3 months ago, buried in local sections of newspapers I hadn't been reading because I'd been too busy running. Mayor's daughter kidnapped. Returned safely after 3 days. Kidnappers found dead in an abandoned warehouse, execution style. The timeline matched. Everything Dante had told me about that night. It lined up. That doesn't make him innocent, I said, but my voice was weaker than I wanted it to be. He still kills people. No, Sophia agreed. But maybe he's more complicated than you thought. The question is, can you live with complicated? I didn't have an answer. Didn't know if there was an answer that wouldn't damn me either way. Be careful, she warned as she left. You're starting to soften toward him. I can see it. Don't forget why you ran. But forgetting was becoming harder when I saw Dante with our sons. When I watched him sit vigil beside Twin B's incubator hour after hour, whispering things he thought no one could hear. I came back late one night, couldn't sleep in the small apartment Dante had arranged near the hospital. Found him already there, sitting between both incubators like a guardian or a penitent. I couldn't tell which. You have to fight Piccolo, he was saying to Twin B, his voice raw with something that sounded like grief. Like your mother did. She stabbed me to protect you. Before she even knew you existed. That's the kind of mother you have. A warrior. You called me a warrior? I hadn't meant to announce myself, but the word had pulled it out of me. He turned, startled, then recovered that careful composure. I didn't hear you come in. You think I was protecting them? I thought I was protecting myself. Maybe both. He looked back at Twin B, at the small chest rising and falling with mechanical assistance. He reminds me of my brother. Marco. The one who didn't survive. I'd heard the name once, early in our marriage. But Dante had never elaborated, had shut down when I'd asked questions. Now, in the dim light of the NICU with our sons between us, he finally told me the story. We were identical. He was always smaller, weaker. I was supposed to protect him. His hand was pressed against the incubator, as close to touching as the barrier allowed. There was an ambush at our compound. I was with my father. Marco was left with guards. They killed him to send my father a message. How old were you? 14. He said it like it was nothing, like watching your twin brother die at 14 was just another Tuesday. I swore I'd never be weak again. Never fail to protect what was mine. I understood then with a clarity that made my chest ache. Every controlling behavior, every possessive gesture, every time he tried to keep me locked away from anything that might hurt me. It all came from that 14-year-old boy who'd failed to save his brother. Understanding wasn't the same as forgiving. But it was something. Is that why you didn't come for me immediately? After the stabbing. I wanted you to choose to come back. He finally looked at me, and there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Vulnerability, maybe, or hope. Not be dragged. You let me suffer alone for 3 months. I know. That was my mistake. The FBI arrived 2 days later like a storm rolling in from the ocean. Agent Reeves and 3 other suits in the NICU waiting room, flashing badges and making demands. Dante's lawyers appeared within minutes. He'd probably had them on standby since we'd arrived, but I'd already been alone with Reeves for 4 minutes. For minutes that felt like an interrogation and an offer and a test all at once. We can protect you, Reeves said, leaning forward across the hospital conference room table. Full immunity. Witness protection. Your children would be safe. I'd invoked my Fifth Amendment right before his lawyers burst through the door. Hadn't told him anything. But I'd taken his card when he'd pressed it into my hand later, when he'd whispered that Dante had ordered a hit on a federal witness last year, that my sons would be in college before their father got out of prison. Dante was waiting in the hallway after, that dangerous calm settling over him like armor. What did you tell them? Nothing. I invoked. He studied me for a long moment. You could have buried me just now. Why didn't you? I looked toward the NICU, toward our sons fighting for every breath. Because of them. Whatever you are, whatever you've done. They don't deserve to grow up without a father. My father died when I was 6. I won't do that to them. Something shifted in his expression. Something that looked almost like gratitude. That night, Twin B crashed. Alarms screaming, oxygen levels plummeting. His tiny heart rate dropping to numbers that made the nurses' faces go pale. Dante and I stood pressed against the glass watching doctors swarm our son, and somewhere in the chaos his hand found mine. I didn't pull away. 45 minutes later, when they'd stabilized him, when the crisis had passed and we were both shaking with aftermath and relief, I collapsed against Dante's chest. His arms came around me, the first physical comfort I'd accepted from him in months. "I can't do this alone," I whispered into his shirt. "I can't. You're not alone. But I don't trust you. I know." His hand came up to rest over my heart. "Then don't trust me. Trust this. What your instincts tell you about our sons." At 2 a.m., I sat alone in the hospital chapel with Agent Reeves' card in one hand and a photo of the twins in the other, trying to figure out which impossible choice would destroy me less. For weeks in the NICU had felt like 4 years, but discharge day arrived with the shocking swiftness of all things you've been desperately waiting for and secretly dreading. Alessandro, 5 pounds of furious determination, and Matteo, 4.5 pounds of quiet resilience, were finally coming home. A chosen Italian names. Peace offering, maybe, or an acknowledgement that these boys were Salvatore's whether I liked it or not, and pretending otherwise would only hurt them in the end. The problem was I didn't have a home to take them to. My apartment above the bookstore in Clearwater Bay was long gone, abandoned the night Dante had left that red rose on my bed. Everything I owned fit in a single duffel bag. Everything except 2 tiny humans who needed stability, consistency, safety. "Come to the estate," Dante said as we signed the discharge papers. "Just until you figure out next steps." I wanted to refuse. Wanted to maintain the illusion that I had choices, autonomy, some measure of control over my life. But my sons needed more than I could give them alone. They needed nurses for the night feedings. They needed security against the enemies I just learned wanted to use them as leverage. They needed what only Dante could provide. "There's a West Wing," he continued, reading my hesitation correctly. "Completely separate. Your own space. The boys need stability. I can give them that." So I agreed. Because what else could I do? The Salvatore estate was nothing like the penthouse I'd fled from 3 months ago. Sprawling grounds surrounded by high stone walls, iron gates that opened automatically as our car approached, gravel crunching under the tires like a countdown to something irreversible. The villa itself was Mediterranean, cream stone and terracotta roof, manicured gardens with fountains that probably cost more than most people's houses. Beautiful and intimidating in equal measure. I clutched Alessandro's car seat handle so tight my knuckles went white. He was sleeping, oblivious to the fact that we were entering what might become either our sanctuary or our prison. Dante carried Matteo's seat with surprising gentleness, the kind of careful attention that still caught me off guard because it didn't fit with the man I'd convinced myself he was. Maria, the housekeeper, greeted us at the door. 60-something with warm eyes and a maternal smile that made something in my chest ache. 2 nurses, Chun and Rodriguez, were already there for night shifts. Victor, head of security, nodded respectfully but remained intimidating despite the courtesy. "Welcome home, Mrs. Salvatore," Maria said. "We've prepared the nursery." Home. The word sat wrong in my mouth. The West Wing was exactly as Dante had promised. Separate entrance, master bedroom suite, nursery with 2 custom cribs already assembled and waiting, sitting room, private bathroom, small kitchenette. Everything I needed to maintain the fiction that I was choosing to be here, that this was temporary, that I could leave whenever I wanted. But I noticed the security cameras in every corner. "Baby monitors," Dante explained. "For safety." I didn't ask if they were also for surveillance. That first night, I unpacked my minimal belongings while the nurses helped establish feeding schedules and sleep routines. Dante appeared in the doorway around 9, hesitating before entering. "May I come in?" Permission asked, not assumed. A new dynamic I didn't know how to navigate. I was nursing Alessandro when Dante settled into the other rocking chair with Matteo and a bottle. The doctor had recommended supplementation. Matteo still struggled with feeding, still needed extra support for everything. We sat in silence, Comfortable or uncomfortable, I couldn't tell. Just two people keeping two tiny humans alive. "You're good with him?" I said finally, watching how carefully Dante held the bottle, how he adjusted the angle when Matteo started to fuss. "I've been practicing. At the hospital. Why didn't I see you? I came at night. After you left. I didn't want to crowd you." He looked down at Matteo, something soft in his expression. "You said you'd show me the truth. About your work." His hand moved unconsciously to the scar on his neck, the permanent reminder of what I'd done to him. "Tomorrow, after the boys are settled. It's not easy to see. I stabbed you, Dante. I think I can handle it. This scar reminds me you're stronger than I gave you credit for." At 3 a.m., both boys decided to stage a coordinated rebellion against sleep. I was pacing with Alessandro, bouncing and shushing and feeling like the worst mother in the world because nothing I did seemed to help, when Dante appeared in the doorway. "Let me help." Together we walked circuits around the nursery, him with Matteo, me with Alessandro, humming lullabies and making the kind of desperate promises you make to babies at 3 in the morning. Eventually they calmed, settling into that boneless sleep that meant we'd won this particular battle. "We make a good team," Dante said quietly. "At this, at least. At this." "Yes." Alessandro had fallen asleep in Dante's arms, and he was frozen, afraid to move and wake him. I pulled out my phone impulsively, took a photo of them together. This dangerous man holding our tiny son with such careful tenderness. Immediately regretted it. But Dante had seen. "Send it to me?" So I did. First personal exchange of our new reality. The next morning, with the nurses watching the babies, Dante led me through the house to a locked door I might have walked past 100 times without noticing. "This is what you saw that night. What made you run?" The stairs descended into cool darkness. Every step down felt like a step deeper into something I couldn't take back. The smell was concrete and metal and something else I couldn't identify but made my pulse spike with remembered fear. I could hear the screaming again, the sounds from that surveillance footage that had sent me running into Dante's office with my world shattering around me. But when we reached the bottom, it wasn't a torture chamber. It was a command center. Walls of monitors showing security footage from all over the city, computers humming with data, filing systems organized with military precision, maps covered in pins marking locations I didn't understand. "This is the heart of my operation," Dante said, watching my face carefully. "What you saw that night, the interrogation, it was real. You admit it. I admit it. But you need context." He pulled out files. Photos of young women, teenagers, faces marked by fear and trauma. Sex trafficking ring. Operating in our territory. The men I interrogated? They were traffickers. The mayor's daughter was one of their victims. "You expect me to believe you're what? A vigilante? I expect you to believe I have a code. I'm not a good man, Elena. But I have lines I don't cross." He showed me the screens explaining how his network tracked trafficking operations, drug rings targeting children, exploitation of the vulnerable. "I control the crime in this city. But I control it to prevent the worst of it. The families who wanted to sell fentanyl to high schoolers? Gone. The rings kidnapping women from Eastern Europe? Destroyed. Sometimes that means violence. Sometimes it means death. I'm not asking you to approve. I'm asking you to understand." I saw the evidence. News clippings of trafficking rings shut down, FBI statements about anonymous tips that led to the rescue of 47 victims. But also photos of dead men, executed after their crimes were discovered. "You're asking me to accept that murder is okay if the victims are bad people. I'm asking you to accept that the world isn't black and white. And what about the federal witness? The one Agent Reeves mentioned." His pause told me everything. That witness was going to put away a corrupt senator. But he was also planning to expose undercover agents. "My people stopped him." "You mean killed him?" "Yes. I left him there in his command center and went to the garden, needing air, needing space to think. Maria found me an hour later with tea and unwanted wisdom. He's not his father, you know? She told me about Salvatore Sr., the true monster who'd run drugs and trafficking and murder-for-profit operations without code or conscience. How Dante had changed everything when he took over, cleaned house, made new rules. Some of the old guard left. Some didn't leave willingly. Is he perfect? No. Is he good? Maybe not. But he's better than what came before. And the boys could be even better. If they have the right mother to guide them. I was still processing when Victor came running. Mrs. Salvatore, we have a situation. The perimeter's been breached. Gunfire erupted in the distance. Victor's team rushed me inside while I screamed for my babies. Dante appeared with a gun already in hand. His face transformed into something cold and lethal. Maria has them in the nursery safe room. Trust me. Please. I nodded. First true moment of trust. The safe room was hidden behind a false wall. Maria already inside with both babies somehow still calm. I grabbed Alessandro and we sealed ourselves in while gunfire echoed through the house. Security monitors showed Dante and his team fighting with practiced precision, taking down attackers who'd come for my sons. I watched him take a bullet to the shoulder and barely flinch, watched him protect this house with single-minded focus, and understood finally what Maria had meant. He was protecting us. Not his empire, not his reputation. When Victor opened the safe room 45 minutes later, I found Dante in his study being patched up by a medic. Blood on the marble floors, bullet holes in the walls, but my sons were safe. The Rossi family, he explained. They wanted leverage against me. This is what you meant. About the boys being targets. Yes. The FBI can't protect them from this. Only I can. I sat beside him for the first time by choice. When I stabbed you, what was your first thought? That I deserved it. That I'd failed you by making you afraid of me. I don't want our sons to fear me, Elena. But I can't change what I am. I can only control how I am. Then maybe we figure out how to do that together. 6 months had transformed everything and nothing. The twins were thriving now. Alessandro at 9 months was already trying to walk, his chubby legs wobbling with Salvatore determination as he refused to crawl like a normal baby. Matteo was gentler, thoughtful, the one who would sit contentedly listening to music, who smiled more than he cried. Watching them grow felt like watching two halves of their father emerge in miniature, the warrior and the philosopher, the force and the finesse. I'd moved from the West Wing. Not to Dante's bedroom, but adjacent to it. A compromise that felt like progress even as I left the connecting door unlocked at night, telling myself it was for the boys but knowing it was something else entirely. Something I wasn't ready to name yet. We'd developed rhythms. Morning routines where I fed Matteo while Dante chased Sandro around the kitchen. Business calls interrupted by baby laughter. Victor teaching Sandro to clap while pretending he wasn't completely charmed by a 9-month-old. Maria's birthday celebration where for the first time we felt almost like a real family instead of people playing house in the wreckage of a marriage. There were touches now. Casual, necessary. His hand on the small of my back as we navigated the nursery in the dark. Brushing past each other in doorways too narrow for distance. Inside jokes about diaper disasters and the particular hell of teething. He was teaching me Italian phrases. I was teaching him my mother's lullabies. We existed in that strange territory between romance and coexistence, something that wasn't quite either but felt increasingly like both. I started sitting in on meetings. My condition for staying, for committing to this life. Why not by the senator instead of threatening him? I'd suggested during one particularly tense negotiation about zoning permits Dante needed for a construction project. The room had gone silent. Dante had looked at me with something between surprise and pride. You're thinking like a Salvatore. I'm thinking like someone protecting her children. One night, wine and exhaustion lowering our guards. My fingers had traced the scar on his neck. The permanent mark I'd left on him. Does it hurt? Only when it rains. Or when I remember your face when you did it. I'm sorry. I was wrong about that night. You were protecting yourself. I can't fault survival instinct. The moment had lingered too long. I pulled away first, afraid of what would happen if I didn't. Then Victor burst into breakfast with news that made my blood freeze. They've taken Sofia. The Rossi family, still hungry for revenge, had kidnapped the one person outside this estate I still cared about. The ransom wasn't money. It was me and the boys. A trade that would never happen but showed exactly how far they'd go. This is my fault, I said, already standing. She helped me escape. She's in danger because of me. This is the Rossi's fault. Dante's voice was cold fury barely contained. Not yours. I have to save her. We will. But not by giving them what they want. In the command center, the same basement I'd once feared and now spent hours in learning the architecture of Dante's world, we planned. Abandoned warehouse in the Port District. 20 Rossi soldiers. Their leader Carlo, known for cruelty. A suicide mission if done wrong. What if I go? I said. As bait. But wired, armed, ready. Absolutely not. Dante's response was immediate, non-negotiable. They want me to trade myself. Let them think I am. Elena, these men will kill you the moment they have you. Not if I kill them first. We argued. He refused. I insisted. Talked about choice and responsibility and not being the kind of mother who lets innocent people die for her mistakes. Finally, he agreed. But only if he came too, if his team surrounded the building, if I wore a vest and carried a gun and followed the training he'd been giving me for months. She's not the woman who ran from me anymore, he told Victor as we prepared. She's a Salvatore. The warehouse smelled like salt and decay. Sofia was tied to a chair, bruised but alive, and the relief that flooded through me almost made my knees buckle. Carlo Rossi smiled like a predator who just won the lottery. Where are the bambinos? The deal was all 3 of you. The boys are safe. You'll never touch them. Then your friend dies. Then you die. Because my husband has 50 men surrounding this building. He laughed, certain I was bluffing. Until I touched my earring, the signal, and Dante's team flooded through every entrance like a coordinated storm. Gunfire erupted. I drew the gun Dante had taught me to shoot, muscle memory taking over as I fired at a man advancing on Sofia. Cut her bonds. Stay down. Then Carlo had me, knife to my throat, using me as a shield against Dante who'd burst through the main entrance with murder in his eyes. One more step, Salvatore, and I open her throat. I thought about the letter opener. About the first time I'd fought back. About what Dante had called me in the NICU, a warrior. I drove my elbow into Carlo's solar plexus, dropped my weight, broke his grip. Dante's shot was perfect. Carlo dropped. On the floor, gasping, I felt Dante's hands on me, checking frantically for injuries. Are you hurt? Tell me you're not hurt. I'm okay. Sofia. We brought her home. I held my babies at 2 in the morning while they sensed something wrong and fussed. And I promised them I was safe, that Mama was here. Dante stood in the doorway watching us like we were something precious he couldn't quite believe was real. Later, on the terrace at 3 a.m. when sleep was impossible, he asked me why I stayed. Really stayed. At first, for the boys. For their safety. Then for Sofia. For Maria. For the people who depend on you despite everything. I met his eyes. And now? I don't know anymore. Maybe for you. He stepped closer. I didn't step back. Elena. The baby monitor crackled. Matteo crying. The moment broke, but something had shifted between us that couldn't be unshifted. The FBI came the next morning with warrants and accusations. Agent Reeves cornered me alone, tried one last time to convince me to testify, to take witness protection, to choose safety over this dangerous life. He's my husband, I told her, the father of my children. And he protects this family better than your badge ever could. You think this ends well? Women like you married to men like him. It never ends well. Then I guess I'll burn with him. First time I'd chosen his side publicly. Completely. without reservation. That night, Dante proposed an exit strategy. Slow transition to legitimate businesses. Real estate, construction, restaurants. Distance from criminal operations over 2 to 3 years. For the boys. So they don't inherit this war. You'd really do that? Walk away. I'd do anything for them. For you. I've been building this plan since the night you stabbed me. Since I realized I'd become the thing my father was. I wanted to be part of it. Not just a witness but an architect. So he taught me everything: money flows, territories, alliances. I learned to read people, threats, opportunities. Became formidable in ways I'd never imagined. One quiet evening, twins asleep, wine glasses between us, he asked if I still hated him. I never hated you. I hated what you did. What you represented. Could you ever love me again? Or was that destroyed the night you ran? I don't know if I ever stopped. That's what made it so hard. Loving you and fearing you simultaneously. These 6 months watching you with the boys, seeing you vulnerable. You're not the monster I convinced myself you were. But you're also not innocent. I love you, he said simply. I've always loved you. I thought showing you power and control would make you love me. I was wrong. You loved the man who held you during thunderstorms. The man who read poetry. I forgot how to be him. Until Sandro and Matteo reminded me. I kissed him. First time I'd chosen him, initiated contact, wanted him without fear diluting the wanting. Months of tension released between us like a dam breaking. I'm still angry at you for so many things. I whispered against his mouth. Be angry. Just don't leave. I'm not leaving. Not anymore. But happiness in our world was always temporary. Victor found the message the next morning. Baby mobile above Alessandro's crib, rearranged to spell in Italian. Debts paid in blood. Dante's face drained of color. The Calabrese clan. I thought they were extinct. They'd left a note. 30 days. You killed our sons. We take yours. He had to tell me then. About the raid 10 years ago when he'd taken over from his father. About eliminating threats and securing territory. About 3 boys, 8, 10, 12, who'd been collateral damage in a building he'd ordered cleared. Did you know they were there? No. But that doesn't matter. I should have checked. I should have been certain. I looked at Sandro and Matteo, at their innocent faces, at the future someone wanted to steal from them. Someone's going to do to them what you did to those boys. This is the world you brought them into. This is the legacy of your choices. You're right. This is my fault. All of it. We had options. Run. Fight. Or Dante could turn himself in to the FBI, take responsibility for everything, let it end with him. That's suicide, I said. But it ends with me. The boys grow up safe. You're free. I spent 24 hours deciding. Reviewed files in the command center. Found information about Giovanni Calabrese, the patriarch. His wife had died in that same raid. This wasn't just revenge, it was a suicide mission. He had nothing left to lose. Unless we gave him something to live for. I have an idea, I told them in an emergency meeting. But you're going to hate it. I wanted to negotiate. Offer Giovanni oversight of Dante's transition to legitimacy. Make him the conscience of the operation until it was clean. He ensures no more children die in gang wars. He gets purpose instead of revenge. Redemption instead of mutual destruction. That gives him power to destroy us, Dante said. Yes, but it also gives him a choice. And right now, choice is all we have. We met at the church. Same place Dante had found me months ago. Full circle. Father Thomas mediated while Giovanni Calabrese entered clutching photos of his dead sons. You bring me the murderer of my boys to a house of God? I bring you a father who understands what you lost. I laid out the offer. The transition plan, the oversight role, the chance to ensure no more children died in gang wars. Nothing can replace your sons. But you can save other sons. You can be the reason this cycle ends instead of continuing. Giovanni studied the documents for a long time. Looked at Dante, at me, at the photos in his weathered hands. Finally spoke in a voice like gravel. And if I refuse? If I want blood for blood? Then you get it, I said quietly. But you also get 2 more dead children on your conscience. And the cycle continues for another generation. Is that the legacy you want? The silence stretched so long I thought my heart would stop. Then Giovanni looked at Dante. You will submit to my oversight. Monthly reports. Any operation I deem too dangerous, you stop. Any violence I don't approve, you answer to me. Yes, Dante said without hesitation. And you? Giovanni turned to me. You will ensure he keeps his word. You will be my eyes inside his organization. I will. Then we have an accord. Not forgiveness, but an end to vengeance. He placed the photos carefully on the church pew. My sons deserve better than their death being used to create more orphans. We walked out of that church into sunlight that felt like absolution. Drove home to our babies who were laughing with Maria, oblivious to how close they'd come to losing everything. That night, Dante and I stood in the nursery doorway watching Sandro and Matteo sleep. You saved us, he said quietly. All of us. We saved each other. He took my hand. Not possessive. Not controlling. Just holding. I meant what I said that night. I love you. I've always loved you. And I will spend the rest of my life proving I can be the man you deserve. I turned to face him. This complicated, dangerous, damaged man who'd become something more than the monster I'd run from. I love you too. I don't know when it happened. Maybe it never stopped. But I love you. Not despite what you are, but including it. All of it. This time when we kissed, it wasn't interrupted. This time I let him pull me close, let myself fall into the wanting without fear tempering it. This time felt like a beginning instead of a continuation of something broken. 6 months later, we stood in City Hall with our sons. Now walking, talking, impossibly alive, and renewed our vows. Not the elaborate wedding from before, when I'd been naive and he'd been hiding. This was simple. Real. Father Thomas officiated.
Sophia stood as my witness.
Victor held Matteo when he got fussy. I, Elena Salvatore, take you, Dante, with full knowledge of who you are and what you've done. I choose you. I choose this life. I choose us. I, Dante Salvatore, promise to be worthy of that choice. Every day. For the rest of my life. The FBI was still circling. Giovanni's oversight was strict and unforgiving. The transition to legitimacy would take years and cost everything we'd built. But we were building something better. Something our sons could inherit without blood on their hands. I'd stabbed a Mafia boss to escape him. Discovered I was pregnant with his twins. Tried to run and been recaptured. And somehow, impossibly, found my way back to love through all that darkness. Not the fairy tale ending I'd imagined as a naive bride. Better. More real. More earned. Sandro tugged on my dress. Mama. Home. Yes, baby. We're going home. And for the first time since that night in the rain with blood on my hands, home felt like more than a gilded cage. Felt like a choice. My choice. Our choice. Felt like freedom.